Good evening and welcome to each one of you on this very pleasant Saturday evening. It's a great joy to host this program on behalf of National Issues and Ecumenical Relations Committee. This is a unique committee, maybe only existing in St. Mark's Cathedral, started by our predecessors like Mr. Pichamuthu and all, with a broader vision of addressing social issues and also issues concerning the community at large, not only Christian community but beyond that. This particular program was in our mind for quite some time in view of the current situation, what we have gone through the last 1.5 to 2 years. Mental health otherwise is a taboo. People think talking about mental health itself is a kind of stigma. Of late, we are seeing there are so many issues connected to mental health, which is affecting people's well-being. We also realize the other side of the lockdown due to work from home, sudden loss of job, loss of income, loss of business, dislocation of people. All these has put a lot of pressure at work and in families, resulting in so much of issues, both in some domestic side and corporate world also is addressing it in its own way. At this point of time, then we were discussing on this topic. We thought we will have an expert to address these issues, and that is where we got. And we are kind enough to have Dr. Matthew Varghese. On behalf of the entire congregation, I extend a warm welcome you, Doctor. I request Asha to give the small bouquet and welcome Dr. Matthew Varghese, MD. He was a psychiatry professor in Nimmans and currently he is the adjunct professor in St. John's Medical College. Thanks to Mr. Samuel Mohan, we are able to have him here. And I request Padri to start with the opening prayer. This particular issue has got a profound impact on the human lives. The very important thing between the physical health and the mental health is that in physical health now we know the metrics, what need to measure. We need to measure the SpO2 or the pulse rate or the temperature, blood sugar, all these things. Problem with mental health is we are not aware of the metrics. And it's not a very visible metric also. We never come to know somebody is mentally ill or not. And we come to know ultimately the ultimate thing has happened. So there a lot of effort is being made in this direction. I think Doctor will enlighten us on this particular aspect. I request Padri to start with the opening prayer.
Shall we look to God in prayer? Gracious God, our loving Heavenly Father, you are our wise counselor, our perfect teacher, and our faithful friend. We thank you for your abiding presence among us through your Son, our Savior Christ Jesus. We thank you for gathering us in this manner through our Cathedral's National Issues and Ecumenical Relations Committee. We are grateful for the leadership of our convener, Mr. Jabakumar. We thank you for each member of this very important committee. We thank you, Lord, for their commitment and dedication. We thank you for their services. We are grateful to you for enabling them to organize this evening's program on the theme, Mental Health Care for All. We are grateful to you for your anointed servant, Dr. Matthew Varghese. Lord, bestow upon him every blessing. We thank you, Lord, for his commitment and dedication to this field. We thank you, Father, for his services. We thank you that you have dedicated him as your instrument of grace to bring in harmony, peace, reconciliation, and Lord, mental health for all. We thank you, Father, for his blessed family who is always encouraging him in this field. This evening, as we begin this session, Lord, we pray that you would use your servant to speak your words of life into our being. We pray that you would deepen our comprehension, broaden our thinking, and transform our understanding as to how we can achieve mental health care for all. Bless us, Lord, in a very special way. Transform us by attending this important session. Glorify yourself. Bless us, be with us, and guide us. We ask these blessings in Jesus' most precious and worthy name. Amen.
Request Mr. Samuel Mohan to introduce the speaker in detail.
Good evening, everybody. I'm afraid that introduction is going to be very, very brief, as requested by Dr. Matthew. We can talk about him for one day, but there are only few lines he has asked us to do. Dr. Matthew Varghese, an MD and alumnus of NIMHANS, is a stalwart and very widely known not only in the country as well as outside. And he often gives lectures and speeches in NDTV and various other forums. He is also currently a member of Medical Pastoral Association in the managing committee, and he looks after therapy and program, which is very, very important for the residents. So when I requested him that whether he could come and talk to us, he readily agreed, and thank you, Dr. Matthew Varghese. Dr. Matthew Varghese is an MD. He's a senior professor of psychiatry, consultant, adult geriatrics, family and community psychiatry, Bangalore. Now we're behind by a lot of time. I think we can go ahead with the program. Thank you very much.
This is on. Thank you, Samuel, for that brief introduction which I wanted, because no point having long introductions. I must first of all thank the pastor and the church, St. Mark's Church, for having me come here to apparently your first in-person program in the last 1.5 years. COVID has not gone away, and I would urge all of you all to wear your masks. But you can come up here if you want, because you don't have to sit so far away. As long as you maintain 6 to 12 feet distance, that's more than enough. But the most important thing is to wear your mask. And a room like this, which is airy, is very good because it will not, you will not catch the virus. So as long as you're inoculated with 2 injections, you wear the mask and you keep your distance, you are fairly safe. So churches have not started yet, no? Started? For the last 2 months? More than that. Right. Yeah, so as I said, we are not out of the pandemic. And as it was said earlier on, it is now during the pandemic that mental health and mental illnesses are getting the very important recognition that it should have got long back. And I will tell you in the next few minutes about why mental illness and mental disorders is so important. Earlier on, the speaker said that the metrics for mental illness is not there. It's not like a blood pressure or sugar reading or temperature reading and you can't make out somebody's got mental disorder. But the metrics is even more simpler. You don't even have to have an instrument. You just have to ask 3-4 questions to see whether there's a person who has some mental disorder. So if somebody has sleep disturbance, if he's feeling sad or anxious, he or she, if he's not able to do all his activities perfectly well as he would like to, if he's having some appetite disturbance, and he generally doesn't feel happy for more than 2-3 weeks at a time, he is very likely to have either anxiety or depression. So the metrics is very simple. And if you find somebody with this kind of picture going on for more than 2-3 weeks continuously, that is enough of a metric to say, to suspect that the person could be having depression or anxiety, which is the commonest kind of mental disorder. So I'm going to take you through this today's talk and tell you how important it is and how you, as individuals, as family members, as a community, as a parish, as a church, can do something for yourselves and your community to prevent and get people who have a mental disorder quickly for help. And I know that St. Mark's is famous for doing this because way back, more than 40 years, 50 years ago, the Medico-Pastoral Association actually started in St. Mark's. And St. Mark's even now is an institutional member of Medico-Pastoral Association. Just like there are members here, Mr. Samuel, Mr. Biji Koshi, and there are many other people, members of your church, who are members of the Medico-Pastoral Association. And I know that as a church, you do look after your people. I mean, I know you used to have some counseling sessions and counseling programs. I know you have an old age home on campus, which is something you look after people who are elderly and who might have problems like dementia. So there is a lot of involvement and there's a lot of pastoral involvement that can be present from your church and your community. Now, this is a metric which is called the Global Burden of Disease, and it basically looks at how serious illnesses, not just mental, all kinds of illnesses, might actually affect society, economy, and health in general. So, as per the estimate, 1 in 4 people all over the world, 1 in 4, that means if you know 4 people, one of them is likely to have some mental disorder. That's a big number, isn't it? 1 in 4 of the world's population is likely to have some mental disorder. There might be very simple disorders like depression or anxiety, and depression and anxiety are very common, and it accounts for more than 300 million or 250 million of this population. It's the 6th leading cause of disability in our country. So besides cancer, heart disease and other things, it ranks 6th. So it's not way down, it's not 20. Other common mental disorder other than depression and anxiety is alcohol and substance abuse. And now we add on a new kind of addiction, which is internet and technology addiction in the last 1.5 years, much more so because of the COVID pandemic. So it's not just enough to say that 1 in 4 people suffer from mental illness. Those families, 1 in 4 families also, are affected as a result of the mental illness, because they have to deal with it. Now, we have very good figures and statistics in our country. This is a survey that NIMHANS did for the country. We surveyed all over the country a population of more than 35,000 people in different parts of the country. This is a survey that was published in 2016. And from the survey, we found that mental, neurological, and substance use disorder, that's what's meant by MNSUDs. Mental, neurological, and substance use disorders. Neurological is disorders like stroke, epilepsy, and so on, headaches. So these disorders are forming a significant burden. So about 10% of the population, so 1 in 10 people of our country suffer from some kind of mental disorder. And that is a huge 150 million people. This was in 2016. Now the numbers would have gone up because our population also has gone up. So these disorders, of which the commonest, as I mentioned, are depression, anxiety, and alcohol and substance abuse, they lead to long-term dysfunction, disability, and generally their economy, their quality of life is affected as a result of that. The other problem that we are seeing, which is the problem, is suicide. And suicide is common, anything upwards of 10 to 12 per 100,000 population. And suicide is more common among the younger people, especially students around the time that they are going for the exams, young men and women, and older men over the age of 60 or 70. And this is a big problem. Now, the issue with mental disorders, which is so common, is the fact that there is a big gap in the treatment. Though so many people, 150 million people have mental disorder, there aren't enough people who they can go to. There aren't enough places who they can go to get treatment for depression and anxiety. But the gap can also be because, as the former speaker mentioned, stigma. You don't want to go and tell people that I have depression. You don't want to go and tell people that I have a problem with alcohol. You don't even want to tell people that I feel anxious in different situations. So you don't want to tell people that there's something wrong with my mind. So because of stigma, they don't go. Or there is really no law or policy which can help people to access care. And the gap, even in the high-income countries like the USA, there also the gap is anything from 30 to 50%. It's not that we are the only poor people. Even the USA and UK are poor because there's a gap of about 50% there. But in our country, the gap is upwards of 70-80%. So only about 10 to 20% of people who have a mental disorder actually reach help. So imagine 70 to 80% of people who have a mental disorder are disabled. They cannot reach help. So mental disorders cost both time and money. Time because of mental disorders, it's calculated that about 50 million years of work could be lost due to anxiety and depression. You may not know what this means, 50 million years of work, but it's basically the fact that people cannot function well. And mental health conditions are supposed to cost the global economy 16.1 trillion in the next 10 years. So it's an expensive proposition, not being able to work. The cost can be direct or indirect. The cost can be because you're not working or because you're not functioning well at work. And it affects the economy because people are not working and people are not earning. Now, it is not useful to go to a psychiatric hospital or a psychiatric department to get help. Ideally, you should get help for mental disorders in your local GP or family physician. Now, the issue with that is that family physicians and GPs and doctors are unfortunately not trained to pick up disease and to handle the disease. So, we all know that if you get care in the community at your local doctor, your GP, your family physician, that is indeed the best, it's the cheapest and the best because you can access care very easily. But most of the beds for psychiatry, most of the care for psychiatry is in large hospitals like Nimans, is in general hospital outpatients like St. John's or St. Martha's or other places. Now, very few people want to go there and access help there because it's crowded, it's expensive, it's, many other things that make it a problem. And the other thing is that we have a shortage of personnel. If you look at the number of psychiatrists in a country, compared to all the other physicians, you will see that this yellow bar here shows that it is less than 1 or 2% of all the physicians. You have a lot of physicians, you have a lot of surgeons, but the number of psychiatrists and neurologists are really very small. So you can see that here. And this is the number of neurologists here, which is again as bad as the psychiatrists. Now, how do you seek help? You need money because either the government has to finance it through some insurance. For example, like the Ayushman Bharat, that's a new insurance scheme that has come. Or you have to finance yourself. Many times it's out of pocket, self-financing. And in countries like ours, in the lower middle income group countries, 18% and more of the finance that is spent, money that is spent for mental illness is from out of pocket, your own pocket. In many other countries, in the higher income group countries like US, UK, Australia and so on, the tax would pay for some free medical care and psychiatric care. This is in about 63% of countries. So we are slowly getting, as the WHO has pushed, we are slowly getting universal health coverage. And as of the last few years, especially so during COVID, mental illness is also getting covered. Earlier on, only physical illnesses were covered. Now, in the last couple of years, the government has pushed and everybody is pushed for mental illness. So if you have depression, if you have got alcohol dependence, if you have anxiety, earlier on if you went to a hospital, they wouldn't cover that. Insurance wouldn't cover that. If you attempted suicide and went to the hospital, they say suicide is a clause for not covering insurance. Or alcoholism is a clause for not covering insurance. Why? These are diseases. So they should be covered by insurance. So that is something that is not happening. So in our country itself, when the finance minister announced the budget in February this year, first of all, health budgets in lower and middle income group countries are less than 1% of the total budget, GDP. But the health budget in our country was only 0.8%, the mental health budget in our country was only 0.8% of the total health budget. So, it is only about 597 crore out of a total budget of 71,000 crore. So, somebody sort of wrote in the papers jokingly that budgets for hospitals like Nimans and other large institutions were upwards of 500, 800 crore. More than the budget for the whole country for mental health. But that's a fact. But the point is that to use this budget, we need personnel, we need people who are trained, we need people to pick up mental disorder and treat it. So if you look at this graph, the blue bars that you see, the light blue bars, are even in high income group countries, the amount that is spent on mental health care is very small. But here if you see this low middle income group country, you will see that it's very poor amount spent, but these dark black bars are the number of people who are living with these disabilities. So number of people living with disabilities is high, but the healthcare that is provided, it is available, or the expenditure for health is very low. The other thing which affects healthcare and whether you can access healthcare is your policy, programs and laws. Now, fortunately in our country now, we have a mental health policy and we have a mental health care act. The mental health policy came out just a few years ago in 2014, and the mental health care act is absolutely new, came out just 4 years ago. Again, this is a problem with lower and middle income group countries, that most Islamic regions don't have a policy, program or a law to help people access care for mental illness. Fortunately, in our country now we have more than 4-5 programs for mental illness. Other than the National Mental Health Program, which was started way back in 1982 by people from NIMHANS, and now the National Mental Health Program actually is covering all 600 districts in the country. Every 600 districts in the country have some mental health professional who are able to deal with mental illness and help people with mental illness. But that's still not enough. We have other programs. For example, the Cancer, Diabetes and Heart Disease program also has a mental health component. The program for the elderly also has a mental health component. And we also have a National Tobacco and Alcohol Prevention program, which is also mental health. So we have a lot of programs in the country. It's just that we need to get people to help and use the programs. So this CARE Act is a very revolutionary act in the sense that you are looking at the rights of people with mental disorders, the right to be protected, a right to receive care, and a right to dignity and freedom. So if somebody doesn't have mental health treatment, you can actually file a case in court saying that so-and-so doesn't have treatment. And the government has to take action, and government has to look after these people who have got serious mental illness. So I've already mentioned these problems and barriers, and basically it's not being able to access healthcare services. It might be too far. If you're staying in Jalahalli and you have to come to NIMHANS, it'll take you a whole day. So you need to have access close to your house. So that means every clinic in a locality should be able to treat mental illness. Second big barrier is knowledge. He said the metrics are not good. You need to be aware that people have a mental disorder. So you need to educate people, and that's the purpose of the mental health day, is to make people aware, to educate people about mental illness. It's not enough that we talk about it 1 month in October, but we should actually be talking about it through the year. But this is something that the WHO and the World Federation of Mental Health have advocated, that in 1 month in a year, let's talk about mental health. And that's how we have these themes of mental health for all. So stigma, I already mentioned that, who would like to go and say that I have depression? No, nobody would like to say that. I already mentioned inadequate facilities. I already mentioned that resources are poor. Now, we need to look at what causes mental disorder. If you know what causes mental disorder, then you can try and prevent those factors. Now, a large part of what causes mental disorders is what causes many other diseases. So that is poverty, low education, unemployment, deprivation, homelessness, a pandemic like COVID, women, gender in terms of women and children and elders. So age, extremes of age, children and elderly. Conflicts, when there's a war, when there's an earthquake, when there's a disaster, that is when mental illness happens. Physical illnesses, this is very important. If you have diabetes, hypertension, or even COVID or any other illness, infective or otherwise, your chance of getting depression or anxiety is about 5 times more. If you take 100 people with a physical illness, 30 to 50% of them will have some anxiety and depression at some point of time. So, if you have a physical illness, it is a big risk factor for mental disorders. So, if you go to a general hospital and survey all the people who are in a general hospital like St. John's or St. Martha's or anywhere else, you will find that if you did a survey in the OPD, you will find that about 30% of them will have some symptoms of anxiety or depression. So, urban poor, people in slums, people who are less educated, these are all risk factors. So, I already mentioned the extremes of age. So, children from anything from 0 to 16 years, about 12% of them have mental disorder. I already said adults in India have about 10%, but children, about 12% of them have mental disorder. Adults, vulnerable groups are young adults who are all the things that I mentioned, but women in the childbearing period when they're having a child, menopausal, life factors, lifestyle factors, and older people. Older people very commonly have either depression or dementia, which is a problem with memory. So if you look at this graph, you can see that these blue bars are the mental disorders and the red bars are problems of aging and dementia. So you can see that there's a peak around the ages of second decade, third decade, fourth decade. So mental disorders are commonest in your teens, in your 20s and your 30s. And as you go into 40s, it starts kind of waning. Same thing with the small bars, which is suicide, the small gray bars, again peaks around teens and young adults and then wanes. But dementia is something that is common in older age. So these extremes of age is, if you know that this occurs in extremes of age, you can target that population and pick up people there. So, for example, in your church, you can have a program for elders. You can have a program for children. You can have a program for people who are poor. You can have a program for women who are out of a job or distressed. So these are the groups that you can actually target. Now, this is something which many of you must have seen. This is the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development. And we are all signatories. This is an agenda for 2030, just 10 years away. And a very important component which the UN has recognized, that in addition to alleviating poverty and improving the economy and so on, and educating people, one very important component in the target number 3 is promotion of mental health and mental well-being, and the prevention of substances, alcohol and substance use disorders, and providing universal health coverage. So it's for development, it's very important to look after your mental health and provide care for mental health. So all countries all over the world are doing things to take care of the social determinants, and this is fighting poverty, inequality, educating everybody. So education for everybody is one of the things that we are signatory. Making things equal, enhancing equity, advocating for gender rights, and opposing violence and discrimination. Then these are social determinants which are very important as a risk factor for mental disorders. So when you look at what are the strategies that you can use, obviously the things at the top, you are not concerned with that. These are national level policies, legislations and so on. But if you know people in power, if you know people in high places, then you can advocate with them and say, hey, mental illness is something that we want handled. So at all your large bodies, you can advocate and say mental disorders is something that we want to push. We want somebody to take care of that. You can do a lot at the community level, as I'll tell you in a few minutes. You can do a lot of things at the institution level, like a church or a parish. You can now do a lot of things at the family level, in your own families, and as an individual. And I'll tell you how you can do these things in the next few minutes. Now, this is a lovely pyramid which the WHO came out with many years ago. If you look at this pyramid, if you look at the bottom of this pyramid, bottom of the pyramid has self-care and informal community care. Self-care is what all of us can do by ourselves. At top of the pyramid is psychiatric hospitals and psychiatric care. Now, obviously, you will know, common sense, that this costs nothing. Self-care costs nothing. You and I can do it ourselves. But on the top of the pyramid, having a psychiatric hospital, having psychiatrists, having big setup costs a lot of money. Okay? But doing the bottom part of the pyramid has the maximum effect. The costs are low, the effect is maximum. So if you prevent a disorder, if you take care of the disorder yourself, rather than going to a psychiatrist or a hospital, you're better off. If you can prevent hypertension, if you can prevent obesity, if you can prevent diabetes, it's a win, no? You can do it yourself. So I'm going to tell you what you can do to prevent mental disorder. And a lot of it is similar to what you can do to prevent physical disorders. So the purpose of programs like this is to educate people. And you, say 20, 30 people in this room should go and tell your families and anybody else who can, teach another 30 people that mental illness is preventable and can be avoided. And you need to have, the church needs to have campaigns, not just 1 month in October, but going on regularly where you talk about mental illness. And that's the only way you can do it. See, talking about COVID, everybody knows what COVID is. Talking about AIDS, everybody knows what AIDS is and how you can get it or not get it. Similarly, you have to talk about mental disorders and talk about how you can prevent it and how you cannot get it. So, this is a very important figure. If you prevent 5 diseases and if you take care of 5 risk factors, you can prevent many diseases. And these 5 diseases: heart disease, chronic lung disease like asthma, cancer, diabetes, and mental and neurological conditions. If you prevent these 5, if you can do things to prevent and take care of these 5 diseases, pick them up early, treat them early, and take care of these risk factors, 5 risk factors. A healthy diet, stop smoking totally, very low or moderate use of alcohol, physical activity, get up and go, get up and move. You don't have to run, you don't have to go to the gym. 30 minutes of activity a day is supposed to be enough to prevent many of these diseases. And many of these risk factors, if you take care of it, you can prevent those 5 diseases. And air pollution. So, wearing a mask is not just good for COVID, but in a city like Bangalore, it's good. You'll see that if you had an allergy, if you had a cough and cold, it would have come down in the last 1 year because you're wearing a mask all the time. I have not got a cold, touch wood, for the last 1.5 years because I've been wearing a mask. I have not had an allergy. That's great. So, it's something that you can do to prevent. So, what are the risk factors for depression? I said a common disease, depression, which can be picked up very easily by any of you. If you have a bereavement in the family, your mother dies, your father, husband or wife dies, your parent dies, you lose a child, you have a very high chance of having depression in the next 6 months. So, you need to take care, and you need to, the community and the family needs to be aware that a person who is going through bereavement could go through serious depression. It's normal to feel depressed after bereavement, but if the depression lasts more than 2-3 weeks and it's more than thinking about the person who you lost, then it's pathological. It's a disease. Sleep disturbance. People who are having sleep disturbance due to any reason, if you don't get good sleep, that can be a risk factor for depression. If you're not sleeping properly for many months, one of the first things that you should do is to go to a doctor and get some treatment for that. I already mentioned medical illnesses and how the risk of having depression or anxiety is 5 times. Or with some drugs, and people who are disabled, say people who have a stroke or people who have lost a limb, these can all cause depression. Your psychosocial situation, being poor, coming from a poor socioeconomic status, or losing money, or losing something else, these are all psychosocial situations. If you had a prior episode of depression, you are more susceptible. If you are a woman, you have 2 or 3 times more chance than a man for getting depression. And as we age, when our brains shrink, that is a risk factor for depression. That's why depression is common among the older people. So to prevent, you just need to take care of these risk factors. You screen people who have a medical illness. Anybody who's got hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, and anything else, you screen them. Ask these 5 questions and say, do you have sleep problems? Are you feeling sad? Are you able to do your work? Simple screening. Aerobic exercise. I said 20 to 30 minutes of brisk walk. It will improve your mood. It will improve your self-satisfaction, and it will make you feel that you've done something. And this is something that is very important during COVID. And we all been stuck in our houses. Yoga and meditation and religious pursuits. Religiosity and spirituality protects against depression and anxiety. Sleep hygiene, I already mentioned that you need to take care of your sleep. And you need to see that you can get these people to help very quickly. Suicide, again, as I mentioned, is a major health problem. But how can you prevent it? It's more in the youth, more in elderly. It's more with people who are abusing drugs like alcohol or diazepam or other drugs. It's more in people who have got a mental disorder. So, the way to prevent suicide is to have gatekeeper training programs like the one MPA runs. We have Sahai Helpline, which is a elder helpline, which is the suicide helpline that is run by many people. Many people in the city run it during the exams for children. Treat depression early. Train doctors to pick up suicidal ideas and suicidal risk. Dementia. Now, it's said in the last, in a Lancet report last year, that 40% of dementias are preventable. And by taking care of these 12 issues, you can prevent 40% of dementias. And what are they? Take care of your heart. I already mentioned. How do you take care of your heart? Look after cholesterol, do exercise, treat your hypertension early, treat your diabetes early. That's how you take care of your heart. Be active. Follow a healthy diet. Not too much of carbs, not too much of fat, adequate amount of protein and nutrients. Challenge your brain with some activity. We all become dead sitting in the house for the last 1.5 years with no activity in the last 1.5 years because of COVID. But challenge your brain. Play some games, do some activities, talk to somebody, socialize. Social activity is very important for brain development. So, if you do these things, you can prevent dementia. Now, I put the slide up because many of you are going back to work, at least the young people, and children are going to school. Now, it's important to look at workplace mental health or school and college mental health and see what you can do for education and prevention. And it's important, and many companies are actually having counseling programs or mental health first aid training programs to see that they can handle their employees, their students, their teachers, and so on in schools and colleges. So it's important to have peer support and mentor support groups in your school, college, workplace. And these informal community sources, I mentioned on the pyramid, the second part of the pyramid is informal community mental health services. And these are basically traditional healers, your GP, the police, teachers, village health workers, lay counselors, NGOs like MPA or some other NGOs, self-help groups. These all prevent people getting more serious and going upwards to mental hospitals. And if people have gone to a mental hospital and been treated, it also encourages down referral. So the community can help a person who's got a serious mental illness. Just a few slides before I end on the psychosocial impact of COVID, because we're still not gone out of the COVID and it's very important for you to know. Now, common mental problems that many of you would have faced or seen in the last 1.5 years is fear and worry about your own health or health of your loved one. Now, these are all in some ways minor mental disorders. And all of us would have faced it. Change in sleep pattern or duration of sleep. We sit watching the TV, watching the news till 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, then you can't sleep. Or somebody sits and listens to the news or sits and sees all those dead bodies being cremated in Delhi and Lucknow and everywhere else. And then what do? You can't sleep. You have difficulty in concentrating. There's change in your eating habits because you work from home, children, everybody is there. You lose your routine. Ordinarily, when you go to work and come home, you have a routine. But because you work from home, everybody's routine goes out of the window. Children are doing what they want, adults are doing what they want, the older people are doing what they want. It's important to have a routine. Some people, because to take care of anxiety, they increase their tobacco, alcohol, other drugs like diazepam or Campos or the sleeping pills. You have a sense of boredom or feeling imprisoned in the house, especially elders. You tell your elders, don't go out, don't go anywhere, you'll get COVID. And they're all sort of confined to the house. So, little more serious mental illness is anxiety and panic. Anxiety related to what's going to happen in the future. Anxiety about death or dying. And especially death or dying alone. Because when you have COVID and go to a hospital, nobody can come with you. You are in the hospital alone. Your family cannot come. So, there are a lot of home-based intervention that all of us can do and have been doing. These are all self-care. Stay home as far as possible. Only few people go out to buy provisions and other material, and those people also, they protect themselves and go out. Avoid visits of other people to your house. No, it's not that you shouldn't socialize, but if you visit, if you socialize like in this today's thing, protect yourself, have a mask, be vaccinated. Important for older people and other people to take the usual medicines at home. Medicine that they usually take for diabetes, hypertension, and so on. And you have to be aware and see, one of the things that happened during COVID is that other medical care went totally out of the window. The hospitals all geared up for COVID, so your simple hypertension, diabetes, and everything else totally got neglected. We are soon going to have in the next few years an epidemic of people with diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and mental disorders. Because all that has been neglected. Because all hospitals are handling only COVID. But one of the new things that has happened and which is good is that everybody, all of you and plus doctors and other people are on a phone counseling and phone consultations. All hospitals are doing phone consultations. And so at least follow up with that. All of us know what these preventive procedures are. The best is the mask, vaccination, then of course distance, avoiding contact with people who might be having COVID. Now washing hands and washing all the objects that you get in your house is not so important because you can't get COVID from all those things. But you wash your hands, you're taught to wash your hands and taught to do things so that you can be clean and you can't pick it up from anywhere. But it's not really necessary to wash all your bags and your milk packet and your newspaper and everything else because people used to do that in the beginning. Now you know that you cannot pick up COVID from the objects in the house, not from your provisions, not from your groceries. So be aware of the symptoms that are there with COVID. For example, all of us know it's like a common cold. Fever, headache, body aches, loss of smell, loss of taste, chills, body aches. So these are all common things that you get with the cold. And if you get COVID, you must be ready to make a plan as to where will you go, who will you contact, which is the doctor you will reach out to, and so on. I already mentioned all these universal precautions. This is about what to do when coughing and sneezing, disposing of the things, washing your hands, and so on. Now, home-based psychological intervention to manage your anxiety. Now, take a break from watching news. You watch the news only for half an hour or 1 hour a day. Don't watch more than that because the news keeps getting repeated. No, they'll repeat the same thing again and again. Even the video clips will be the same, but they'll go on about it the whole day. Use your gadgets, computer and all that only for work or socialization or for recreation. If you want to play a game, if you want to talk to somebody, a family member in America or Bombay or somewhere, okay, use the computer. Otherwise, don't use the gadget. Take simple deep breaths, sit in a chair, stretch, meditate, say prayers, do yoga, do exercise, get enough sleep. Avoid taking pills for sleep, alcohol or tobacco. Practice social distance, but not social isolation. Many times, it's not going to the hospital that people have got COVID. People have got COVID actually from their homes. And why is that? Because when somebody comes to the house, say your maid comes to the house, you should make sure that she is masked and you are masked. Many times that's how somebody brings in COVID into the house without your knowledge. Very few people, except for people who are looking after COVID in the hospital, doctors. Otherwise, going to hospital, you will not simply pick up COVID if you protect yourself with a mask and other things. So it's important to connect with people, not socially isolate yourself. So you can talk to them on the phone, you can talk to them, in the open air. And talk about your concerns, talk about what is bothering you and making you feel bad. Get involved in a daily routine in the house. Get involved with cooking, looking after the child, preparing meals. All the things in the house you get involved with. And do other enjoyable activities like recreational activities like listen to music, drawing, painting, reading and so on. So here it is looking after yourself. So exercising, eat a nutritious diet, sleep adequately, connect with other people, minimize news uptake. Very important. So to reduce your anxiety, you need to tell yourself that Lord, help me to accept the things that I can change and accept the things that I cannot change. You can do things for what you can change. You can follow a regular routine. You can wash your hands. You can wear a mask. You can get vaccination. You can talk to somebody. These are things that you can do. But the things that you cannot control, will I get COVID or not? Will my father get COVID or not? Will my children get COVID when they go to school? Take precautions. Once you take precautions, pray to God and then try and reduce your anxiety. So focus on things that you can control, like your daily routine, meals, exercise, and so on. And don't control other people. If other people are not wearing a mask, if other people are not doing something, don't pick up a fight with them. Many times you see in the shops, the shopkeepers never wear a mask. They have it here. So I keep telling them that when they come to the counter, I tell them, put your mask up. And usually they oblige. But you need to do that. But don't have to pick up a fight with them, because I've seen people picking up a fight also. Talk to elders and children, very important, because elders and children are very susceptible people. Allocate household routines and responsibilities to everybody. Don't leave the adolescents out, don't leave the elders out, don't leave the children out. And remember what you did in the past to tackle stress and what methods you use for anxiety. So this again is just a pictograph. Remaining connected, remaining busy, helping others, be with the family, be aware of your mental status, listen to music. So during COVID, you need to protect the vulnerable population. And the vulnerable population is elders. Elders have a higher chance of getting COVID because they also have physical illnesses like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, lung disease, and so on. And also, if you're not vaccinated. So people who are not vaccinated, people who are elders, people who have chronic disease, they are the ones who are at risk. And you need to take care of them and target them and give interventions. Similarly, young children now, because children are not vaccinated, they have as much of a chance of getting the disease. And that's why schools and colleges are just slowly opening up and people are giving them a choice of whether they want to do hybrid or not. But fortunately, the severity of the illness is much less in children. So that's why people are not so worried, but people are waiting for vaccination to occur there also. So if you have these at-risk population, you can provide targeted intervention for these people. This is just a slide with the various things that you must do. So public health measures, the whole country is on lockdown. We have 2 lockdowns. Now, whether to open or close, whether to go on lockdown or open up, it depends on a whole bunch of factors. And there are definitely benefits in opening up because the economy improves, children go to school, people go to work, people socialize, you have a gathering like this. That is important because it's all important for our development and growth. So that's why we are slowly moving towards this, and it's a public health kind of decision whether we should slowly open up or not. And there are various, lots of websites where you can get support. Ministry of Health has a website, NIMHANS has a website. So take home message is this: older adults are more vulnerable, both physically and psychologically. Family and community must work together to see that we can take care of mental illness and also during COVID. I already mentioned that simple interventions by yourself, family members, counselors can help. Following a regular routine, taking your routine medication, following a system in your house is very important. Don't focus on uncertainty. Focus on what you can do by yourself. So, to end this last slide, all of you, individuals, family members, community, the church, must collaborate with people like us. And how can you collaborate? By doing things yourself. Self-care, community care, to see that we can partner to conquer mental illness and these problems. So from a strategy of no health without mental health, which is what we talked about earlier on, the current strategy is you cannot have sustainable development. The country cannot improve if you don't have mental health. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take a few questions if you have.
Doctor, I will ask one question.
Sure.
Companies advertise, you know, a high protein diet or maybe the protein mix what they produce can prevent all kinds of Alzheimer's and
High protein diet?
is it true?
High protein diet.
High protein diet.
Take your regular balanced diet. Why do you want to pay money for high protein diet? Have a balanced diet which has about 30% of your diet should be proteins. So dal, cereals and all those things. Less than 30% of your diet should be carbohydrates, which means rice, chapati and all those things. Less than 30%. Increase fruits and vegetables in your diet. And you must have fats also in your diet because you need fat to run the brain. So it's not that you cut off fats totally. About 10 to 20% of your diet should be fats and healthy fats. So things like nuts and things like, things which are considered as healthy fats.
This is on behalf of one of the ladies who responded to this, seeing our poster for this program. She had asked, I didn't see her here, but then her teenage son has got a gadget addiction. She has asked me whether this program would help that.
Yeah,
in
not
any
really. I didn't focus on that. In today's paper, there was an article about the shut clinic at Nimmans, and one of my colleagues there talking about addiction and what they can do. They can probably get help for that. You can reach out to counselors. We have a clinic called the Shut Clinic.
Okay.
So she can reach out to that clinic and get help. And many other places have online help for gadget addiction.
Doctor, you mentioned something called bipolar. What is that? Bipolar.
Did I mention bipolar?
In one of the slides it was there. What does it mean?
Well, I don't know what came up on the slides. Bipolar disorder is usually a serious mental disorder where there are episodes of highs, which is called mania, and lows, which is called depression. That is not a common, but an uncommon, but serious mental disorder like schizophrenia. It accounts for about 1% of the population. So that's a serious mental disorder, which I did not cover today because serious mental disorder is not very common. It's not very, it's very more disabling, but it's not common. Common disorders are depression, anxiety, and alcohol substance abuse.
I have one question, Doc. Why is this treatment for mental illness is so expensive? It's so expensive.
It is not expensive actually.
But it's very prolonged and expensive. Therefore, it's expensive.
No, see, that way, many diseases treatment is prolonged. If you have diabetes, you have diabetes for life. If you have hypertension, you have hypertension for life. If you have a heart problem, you'll be taking medicines for heart till the end of your life. So mental disorders are not that long. Except if you get a serious illness like what he said, if you get bipolar or schizophrenia, then the treatment might be for 5-10 years. But for depression, anxiety and all that, treatment is only for about 6 months or 1 year, not more than that.
Thank you.
And the medicines are not expensive. Medicines are quite cheap. It's the main thing is to access help, to go to a doctor and get help for depression or anxiety. That is the challenge.
Yeah, Doctor, you mentioned about the SDG goals, sustainability goals, 2030 and all that. I also studied about the happiness index. which is getting measured, and a small country like Bhutan is scoring very high on the happiness index. Why India is still very low in that? What we can, as a community, as a church, can we do anything on that?
Yeah, I think we are not very low. In fact, it is seen that despite being poor, many people in the villages and poorer people are actually quite happy with their lives. It's a rich and people who are in the cities who are unhappy with their lives because they are not getting what they want. They don't get what they aspire, and their aspirations are very high. But I think social capital and being connected with other people socially, so as a church, as a community, as a parish, being connected, helping people, doing things for other people is something that will give you a lot of satisfaction and happiness. So I think that is one thing that definitely the church can do.
Doctor, this mental illness, is it hereditary?
Is it hereditary? Usually this common mental disorders like depression, anxiety and all that is not usually hereditary. Some of the serious disorders might be hereditary, but what is the commonest disorders like, some alcoholism can be hereditary. So if your father or mother had alcoholism, it's likely that some children might get alcoholism or substance abuse. But otherwise, it's not really hereditary in that sense. That way, if you look at it, on the other side, all illnesses are hereditary. If your mother and father have diabetes, you are supposed to be a potential diabetic. If your mother and father had heart disease, you're likely to have heart disease. So that way all diseases, because our genetic makeup is obviously like your parents. So if your parents had that, even your ability to get tuberculosis or not is genetic. So in that sense, if you look at it, everything is genetic. Because you have a vulnerability, a predilection if your parents had the disease. But I think the question that you asked is purely about, is it transmitted? If somebody is there in your family, is it like a kind of black mark that, you can't marry or you can't, that's the usual context. And the answer to that is no.
The psychosomatic cases what we have in India, and as you mentioned that this awareness is not there. But primarily, what I also have seen across is the counselors who are there. I think they've still not come up to the age of keeping the confidentiality, which is where the people who are having the psychosomatic disorders, they are worried about, the social stigma, as you're saying. So, is there something which the organization like NIMHANS or the health ministry doing something on these areas?
So, the problem with counseling or therapy in our country is it's not licensed. Doctors have a license, there's a medical council. Dentists have a license, there's a dental council. Nurses have a license, there's a nurses council. So, these councils see that the person has got a particular degree, he has got through a degree, he gets a registration, and there's a certain code of conduct for them. Unfortunately, that is not there for psychologists, social workers, and various counselors. And so, what you said might be because the person is not trained, and anybody who comes out as maybe a BA or BSc or MA, they say they are counselors and do counseling. I'm not saying there aren't, you could train those counselors and give them information and make them better. But if somebody just started a clinic just because he or she did BA psychology and started doing counseling, then you will have the kind of problem that you are thinking of. But there are moves in the country to see that you can license psychologists, social workers and counselors. There is an organization called the Rehab Council of India, RCI, just like the Medical Council of India. And that is slowly licensing psychologists and social workers and counselors who have a proper recognized degree in these things. So that's slowly happening. But we're still like, that's one of the things that we are far behind. We don't have a license. You see, in the US, UK, Australia, and all that, every counselor, psychologist, social worker has to be licensed. They have to go through a licensing exam, they have to go through a board, and they have to get a registration, which is not there, unfortunately, in our country.
Mention the importance of having a creative hobby, because it's it's
Not having?
a creative hobby.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That is like very important.
Yeah. So I
Very
mentioned
effective.
I mentioned games, I mentioned painting, I mentioned music,
Okay, but learning something like learning an instrument.
learning a
or
new thing.
Learning a new thing.
So that is for dementia. You challenge your brain by learning a new thing. That is something that is supposed to be helpful for preventing dementia.
Yeah.
Very important. It is there on one of those slides. Challenging the brain
Okay.
is also about. I didn't
Comes
go into it
under
in
that.
detail. Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody had a question there.
This is a COVID-related question. It's in the papers today. A lady in her 30s had a Covishield vaccination. I don't know if it's the first or the second one. She comes home and then goes to the neighborhood to make a payment or something. On her way back, she collapses, and 30 minutes later, she passed away. Now, this is not an isolated case, I suppose, and I heard of cases where people have taken the vaccination, but yet they've been infected, and there are those who have not been vaccinated but don't have COVID. How do we instill confidence in the general public? You know, there are many, even within our circle, people who have opted not to go for it. But then, as you also encourage vaccination for general health at this point, particularly given the pandemic, what are your thoughts on that? Would appreciate that.
Yeah. So all of you know that India finished 1 billion vaccines, no? And these kind of occurrences which you see in the paper are extremely rare occurrences. Now, vaccination does not prevent you from getting a disease. For example, you could take the polio vaccine, children, but you can still, very small percentage of people will develop polio. So that doesn't mean that for the larger population, polio is useless. Polio vaccine is useless. Same way with COVID, the Covishield vaccine or the Covaxin is effective anything from 80 to 90%. You can get 80 to 90% of people can get good immunity. And if you get the disease, it's likely that you get a milder disease. So, in the last 1.5 years of experience, not 1 year of experience all over the world, it is shown that vaccination is something that definitely helps for preventing disease or for attenuating serious disease. It prevents hospitalization, prevents death. Isolated cases you might get. There's stories of somebody having a heart attack or somebody. The fact that he took vaccination and fell down might not be because of the vaccination itself. To establish a direct causal relationship between the vaccine and the death is very difficult. So, there is no doubt, let nobody in the room have any doubt, that vaccine is 90% effective. If you don't take a vaccine, then you have a serious problem. I know people, one of my colleagues, doctor, his family in Delhi, none of them took vaccine. Because they said, oh, we'll wait, this is way back in March, April. And I can give you many stories like this. There are 3-4 old people in the house, there are 2 young people in the house. They said, oh, we'll wait, I don't know, we're not. And my friend kept on telling them, please take vaccine, please take vaccine. The whole family had COVID. One young person and one old person died. The 2 other people who were left over, one middle-aged person and an older person, they still have lung disease. The lung got fibrosed. They are disabled. So like that, there are many stories of the whole family getting wiped out because of COVID. So please don't listen to what you read in papers, because the papers will only publicize problematic things. Papers won't tell you that, thousands of people got COVID and everybody is doing fine. They will take up somebody who died and push that up, and then you will believe it. So don't use that scientific evidence. Watch any of the videos on YouTube by Gagandeep Kang or R. Ravi, or there's another Matthew Verghese from Delhi who's talking about COVID. Or just watch the WHO site about vaccination. There's something called News in 5 on the WHO on COVID. Watch that. These are all scientific points to tell you why you should take vaccine and why vaccine is extremely important. What you are talking about is all isolated cases, rarities. They are. And many countries, see, why is it that many countries are making that if you are not vaccinated, you can't come into that country? Why? For them to make a law, Australia says if you're not vaccinated, you cannot come and play the Australian Open tennis. If you're not vaccinated, you cannot go into, if you don't show a vaccine certificate, you cannot go into UK. People who have a vaccine certificate, they can go in. You don't have to isolate yourself. Otherwise, you have to do RT-PCR and XYZ, so many things to see that they are protected. So why a country is deciding like that? In a place like the USA, which is so literate and so knowledgeable and so much of resources, why is it that people are still dying by the dozen? Because the vaccine take up there is less than 50%. Trump himself was a best example. He talked about how stupid the vaccine was, and he himself went and got COVID, and then he shut up. Same with Boris Johnson. In the beginning, he was talking about all that is stupid. Then he got COVID, and he went into hospital, and after that he shut his mouth. Now they vaccinated almost the whole population in the UK. So the countries that are doing badly, like Brazil, another person, Bolsonaro, high deaths with COVID, low vaccine take-up. But in a country like ours, which is vaccine take-up is still going up, number of deaths are much less, Our number of deaths are much less than USA, whole of Europe and Brazil. So, take it from me, I'm a psychiatrist, but take it from me. In the last 1.5 years, what we have got knowledge about is a lot of knowledge about COVID. Don't be susceptible to false information about COVID. And believe the correct information about COVID. For example, mask, vaccination, distance. If you don't wash every object in your house, that's fine. You won't get COVID from the objects. You won't get COVID from your newspaper and your milk packets and your vegetables. No. Because COVID doesn't stay on that. COVID is transmitted through the air with droplets or aerosol in a room which is close, which is not well ventilated. At this distance, with a mask on, very unlikely you will get COVID. Any other doubts about COVID? Because very important that all of you are vaccinated, double vaccinated. Yeah, so that's something that the church can do. And that's something that is allowed, isn't it? Many residential associations have, the BBMP has actually got people to come there and do COVID vaccination. Okay? Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions. I hope it was useful, and I hope you sort of convey this message to 30 other people, each of you.
Formal vote of thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you happy with Dr. Matthew Verghese' talk? Yeah, that is the first sign of approval. I am going to mention very briefly 2 or 3 points. First, that we were groping in the dark for 1.5 years. I say it with full authority that our doctors did not know what had hit them. But as a community in Bangalore, the hospitals performed valiantly. I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you which hospitals. The police force suddenly had domestic violence because these fellows were all cooped up at home. And most of the time they are out. So there was domestic violence, and we had to conduct a counseling course for police inspectors. 415 inspectors joined for this counseling, which was organized, thank God, by FANA, the body of private hospitals. Very masterfully done. Kamal Pant should take the credit. And the first question they asked, when can we get out of the house? Because we are fed up. So there was some psychological pressure on these poor chaps. Of the hospitals, the best performers, the most humane was Ramaya. How do I know that? People were being turned away by all the private hospitals because there was no place. Mr. Dodi was here, Sardarji from the Gurdwara. I asked him to come because his sister-in-law was dying. No hospital was accepting them. Finally, with great difficulty, I managed to push her into Vikram, and 30 minutes later she revived. Otherwise, she was gone. This is the kind of story there is. And the cops, there is one more story, which is, there are 100 stories, but one I must say. Midnight, Additional Commissioner of Police is woken up. His name is Nimbalkar. You may have heard his name. He's a famous guy. He's from a very distinguished Maratha family. He was disturbed, and his orderly said, you got some people who are desperate, they are crying, they want to meet you. And there were 2 dead bodies at his doorstep. And they said, we cannot cross the border unless you give us a pass. Can you imagine? Dead bodies, no pass. Immediately, he issued the pass. He gave them an escort. 210 kilometers taken, bodies were taken for cremation to the village. 210. This is a true story. Our own Reggie Chandi, you must have heard of him, could not cross the border. He was almost dead. Until enlightened police officers here were able to give us the idea, go to the border, ask CMC Vellore to send their ambulance to the border and transfer him to their ambulance. Can you believe this? This is just 1 year ago. How much ignorance there was. Today, we are in a much better position, and I have been informed just today that we can take the booster, especially if you are senior. Sam, Jeva, these are the stalwarts of this church. You can take a booster provided 6 months have passed. Yes, we have to take it. And another good news is that the pills are coming. You can take the pill before and during. The pills are coming. it's under manufacture. Moment it is thing, it is going to, because then you don't have to go to the hospital. The pills come to you, you can take it like any other medication. You are a stalwart. How do I know that he's a stalwart? Because I think he did a magnificent job, as Sam Mohan will tell you, in a small inquiry that we had. I read the report. It was thorough, it was factual, it was hugely educative, and the process that he followed was meticulous. It will stand up in any court, including the Supreme Court of India. That is the greatest compliment I can pay to you. Your IQ is very high, and I must thank Sam Mohan for selecting him. And of course, your future is brighter now that you are out of NIMHANS, because you are no more in a government controlled facility, and I hope that you will do well. Thank you for coming to St. Mark's.
The traffic, the possibility of rain on a Saturday evening. Thank you so much.